What are the best anti-infantry units available to the Necron Codex? Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k. Now in this video we're going to be talking about anti-infantry options that we've got available to the Necron's Codex. Are you struggling against infantry? If so, we're going to be going through many different units. We've got a whole list of them here. I've got Skorpekh Destroyers, Lychguard, Triarch Praetorians, Spyders, Hexmark Destroyers, Lokhust Destroyers and many others. We're going to go through them, analyse them, look at the strengths and weaknesses against hordes as well as elite infantry as well, because there's two different types of infantry there. So giving the strengths and weaknesses, and then I'm going to do like a bit of a tier list thing at the end, talking about the best elite killers, the best horde killers and so on. So of course, if you've yet to do so, please do subscribe down below. We're currently putting out about 2 videos a week, Wednesdays and Sundays, and we're also throwing out a short every day as well, just for a little bit of extra fun. It's part lore and part tabletop. The first unit I'm going to be talking about is the Necron Warriors. So Necron Warriors, 200 points for the 20-man unit. That's likely the way you're going to go. You're not going to go with a 10-man unit. The strengths of having Necron Warriors against enemy infantry. First of all, against hordes at 12 inches, they're going to throw out a scary amount of dice into toughness 3, toughness 4. You could even go beyond that in theory, but really hordes are toughness 3 and toughness 4. You've got a really good board presence here with 20 models, so you're flooding the table. And being a 20-man unit, and likely with a Cryptek, maybe there's a Resurrection Orb in the unit, it's going to be potentially a hard unit to shift. And they've also got great detachment synergy. They're pretty much linking up with all the detachments apart from the Annihilation Legion. All the other ones, there is some sort of link, whether you're throwing in a Cryptek, whether you're throwing in a Noble, or being led and so on. So really good detachment synergy. Now the weaknesses for Necron Warriors, well first of all the elites. If you're going elite infantry hunting, well damage 1 no AP or damage 1 and -1 AP isn't really going to do much against the more elite infantry such as Space Marines or even beyond that, Terminators, Custodies. You're not going to do much there. Even if you've got lethal on, once you get onto the armor saves, it's not really that great, and AP -1 could easily be wiped out with cover saves. Also, you're going to need characters or buffs for consistency, otherwise the output feels underwhelming. You're going to literally need to spend more than 200 points just to give them a little bit of something. And again, it kind of depends on the detachment. If you're in the Awakened Dynasty, you're going to need a leader of some sort to get a +1 to the hit roll. So the verdict for Necron Warriors, they're an excellent anti-horde unit, but they do lack bite into elite infantry. Next we come on to the Necron Immortals, 70 points for a 5-man unit. In terms of their strengths, going up against the Marine equivalents, the Ghost Blasters with lethal hits and strength 5 -1 AP, that really does put pressure on the Space Marines. You're likely going to be wounding most of these things on a 3-up, and with lethals as well, that's also handy. Against the hordes, I think Tesla is better here because you've got the sustain hits too, and you can spike really good with the dice. You don't really need the AP, you don't really need the lethal hits, you're just going in volume there. So against hordes, that's a really good option. They obviously have a better accuracy of a Ballistic Skill 3+ in comparison to the Necron Warriors who hit on a 4+. They're going to be re-rolling to wound, whether it's ones or all the win rolls on objectives. You're getting pretty good value with Immortals because it's only 70 points as an investment. It's a very small investment, cheap as well as being flexible, and again great detachment synergy. Pretty much all the detachments bar one, you could make some sort of synergy move with Immortals. Weaknesses though, they're still damage 1 just like the Warriors, so the Terminators, Custodies, they're going to tank most of it, especially the ones that have got the 2+ armor saves and just lots of wounds, they're just going to tank it. Tesla, it can be swingy, you are really relying on those 6s to spike. Without it, you are lacking in AP, and again only damage 1. Ghost weapons into invulnerable saves is sometimes irrelevant because even though you've got a bit of AP, if they've got a standard invuln save of a 5+ or a 4+, it's not as useful. And also the lethal hit will bypass their implacable eradication ability, which is the re-rolls of wound rolls. If you've got the lethal hits, you're not going to be rolling to wound, so therefore it's kind of a bit of an ability clash. So verdict for Necron Immortals, they're a balanced all-rounder. They're not the best at either role, but they're never bad. They're okay. Going on to the Lychguard, 85 points for 5 or 170 points for 10. If you're going elite killing with the Necron Lychguard, Well, you could go with the war size. I know not many people take the war size, but if you did, strength 8 minus 3 AP, 2 damage with devastating wounds that literally cleaves through Space Marines and the equivalent. If you were to go against hordes, the Hyperphase swords are the better option. You do have more attacks and they're going to cleave through toughness 3 because they are strength 6. So that's all you need to win on 2s, and you've still got a bit of AP there to play with. Of course, they're going to be durable if they've got the dispersion shields, a 3+ save and a 4+ invulnerable save. So they're going to be using those attacks turn after turn. And yet again, great synergy with detachments. The Awakened Dynasty and the Obeisance Phalanx are the two that stand out there. Weaknesses for Lychguard: the Hyperphase swords are damage 1, so they're pretty much inefficient against those elite style infantry models. If you are selecting the war scythes, they're going to be overkill on the smaller stuff, the gaunts, the guardsmen, the guardians. They're going to be overkill, they're going to be too much, so you're kind of wasted taking war scythes against those kind of units. Of course, if you do take the war scythes, there is no shield option, so you're not going to get the 4+ invulnerable save, which kind of devalues the unit in general, even though you're paying the same points. And without the mobility, you're going to need a Veil of Darkness or some sort of transport like a Night Scythe, Monolith potentially. And without those things, then you're kind of risking doing nothing other than hold objectives because of their slow pace. Finally, they need a Noble to be more durable with the -1 to wound with the Guardian's Protocol ability, which of course is going to be more points to add to the unit as a whole. Verdict for Lychguard: they're a reasonable infantry remover, but they do need the right loadout, which you of course have to select pre-game. On to the Canoptek Spider for 75 points. Strengths: if you're going up against elite infantry, you've got the claws with AP -2, 2 damage, so they're punching through your standard intercessors quite nicely. Against the horde, you've got the 2 particle beamers, which have got blast as well as devastating wounds, so that gives you a bit of flexibility with the shooting. You can kind of do both jobs here. They're good value as well, 75 points, and they do a lot more than just fighting. They could be, action heroes, objective holders, and they work well with some of our best units, in fact, the Silent King and the Doomsday Art, etc. Giving the Feel No Pain buffs, making those units more durable, and then they can be doing their thing. Weaknesses though for a Canoptek Spider: well, the beamers are only AP 0, so they're not going to be fantastic against decent armour. 3-up armour, it's not going to do much. Yes, you're going to get your opponent to eventually fail with some 1s and 2s, but in general, they're not doing a lot. And if you're going up against Terminators, it's even worse on a 2+. They're unreliable in melee with only weapon skill 4+. And finally, if the support role isn't needed, the efficiency just drops in general. Verdict for a Canoptek Spider: going up against Anti-Infantry, well, they are a hybrid threat. They can do multiple roles. Solid versus elites in melee, okay versus hordes at range, but they shine through their utility, so they're not really the best anti-infantry, but they could do a bit of both. Onto the Skorpekh Destroyers, 90 points for 3. Now these are very good elite killers. With your strength 7, -2 AP, 2 damage, you've got a lot of rerolls going off. That's absolutely deadly against your Space Marines, even Terminators, to be honest with you. I know it's 2 damage, but with the amount of attacks you get, you're getting a lot of swings per model. You can use that Plasma Sight once per battle, or if you've got 2 of them in a unit on a full unit, you're going to unlock devastating wounds for a big punch. So all the units that have got really good armor saves or really good invulnerable saves, again, Terminators, Custodes come to mind, you're going to be bypassing those saves with devastating wounds. 90 points, very cheap for the damage that they can actually deliver. Weaknesses: they're overkilling into hordes or anything toughness 3. You don't want to be putting strength 7 -2, 2 damage into your standard guardsmen, so it's not worth it. It is overkill there. They are fragile, they've got no invulnerable save, so the points are wasted if they do die before swinging, if they do get shot before they get into engagement, or if they get within engagement range of the wrong unit. Again, if you jump onto 10-man guardsman unit, then you're kind of wasted, aren't you? You've thrown them away because you're going to waste a turn dealing with them, and then you may get shot in your opponent's next turn. So to get the best out of them, you will also require a Skorpekh Lord, giving mortal wounds on the charge, giving lethal hits, and of course his hits with this Harvester melee weapon. But when you combine all that, it is a bit of a beefy unit. Verdict: they are one of the best elite killing melee units that Necrons do have. As for going up against hordes though, not so much. It's overkill. Triarch Praetorians, 90 points for 5 because they had a points reduction quite recently. Going up against elites, the Rod of Covenants, they are damage 2 in both melee and at range, so that of course is decent enough at the intercessor level units. Going anything beyond that is maybe not so much. You are strength 5, 2 damage. You probably need a bit more punch to go up against the big stuff. Against hordes, if you go with the void blades, that's going to do a lot of work on the smaller stuff, the toughness 3, because you're getting more attacks. Mobility wise, you've got deep strike, a 10-inch move, which is obviously very flexible to get them into where they need to be for their short range weaponry, as well as the rerollable charge roll. They're usually going to be fighting first due to their fallback and charge ability as well, which is handy. So in your turn, you just drop back and go back in, so defenders won't be fighting first because you've just made a charge move. But weaknesses, they're not a specialist. I mean, they're losing to warriors against hordes, they're losing to Skorpeks against elites, so they're not a specialist at either of those jobs. They're only toughness 5 with a 3-up save, no invulnerable save, so like some of the other units that we've already mentioned, quite fragile once they are left out in the open. They've got very poor detachment synergy. They don't really apply to anything other than the Obeisance Phalanx because of the Triarch keyword. You could potentially argue the Hypercrypt Legion because you can pop them in and out with Deep Strike. And finally, there's no option of a leader, so you can't be really bumping up any buffs for this unit. Verdict, jack of all trades, master of none. Lokhust Heavy Destroyers, this is specifically with the Exterminator weapons because that's the anti-infantry weapon. The Gorse Destructors are an anti-tank weapon, so we don't need to mention that in this video. 55 points for a single unit, a single model in a unit, and of course you could go up to 3 in a unit. The strengths, well, against hordes, they're fantastic because each one could have a potential of 12 shots with strength 6, and that's going to have sustained hits 1 as well. So that's probably one of our best blob killers, one of our best anti-horde killers that we've got at range. If you add a Lokhust Lord, you're going to get 5+ critical hits on those sustained hits 1, which is going to give you even more value with those weapons. And he adds a Resurrection Orb as well to keep the unit up and running. 36-inch range also keeps them safe. If they can be firing 36 inches away, yes, you're not going to have 12 shots per man, it will only be 6. But 36 is a decent amount, and if you did want to get half range, it's still 18. It's not too bad. The value is good at 55 points, but they do have some weaknesses. Damage 1, AP -1. It doesn't really hurt the big, the broad stuff. Terminators, Space Marines in cover, 2-up armor saves. It's not going to really do that. I know you've got volume of dice, but you are literally going to be relying on 1s or maybe 2s, and that's without cover. A unit of 3 of them is 165 points, so you're competing with other firepower in the Codex, whether it's Immortals, Lokhust Destroyers and so on, but I think they do compete quite well, so my verdict is the best ranged horde clearer that Necrons have, just for the toughness 3 stuff because you will be wounding them on 2s. The elite stuff, not so much. Tomb Blade, 75 points for a 3-bike unit. As for the strengths, well, the particle beamers with blast, they're going to roll high into horde units, 20-man units. They're going to be rolling hot, especially if you take a full unit of 6, although that is 150 points. Most of us take them in 3s because they're more of a utility piece, scoring up our secondaries. The twin Gorse with the lethal hits can chip away at marine equivalents because the lethal hits, and then there's a bit of AP there. And the twin Tesla can spike into hordes. Plus they give it more mobility because you get to assault with that weapon. Don't forget we've also got Scout 9 inches, and then they can move after shooting as well, so that's going to make them quite slippery, quite hard to pin down, and they're going to be moving all over the place. So a solid value at 75 points. I think I'm more in tune with the anti-horde weapons in this and this data card over the, rather than the twin Gorse, but you do have some options. Of course, you've got war gear options as well, with like stealth, for example, or ignoring cover. That will aid even further the effectiveness of the unit. But the weaknesses, it's all damage 1 stuff, so it's going to be limited impact against the tougher infantry, and of course they are fragile if they do get picked off. So the verdict for the Tomb Blades, they're a skirmisher horde clearer. Great value for harassment, not so much for the elite killing option, but definitely another horde clearance. Next I wanted to go into another destroy unit, which is the Hexmark Destroyers, 75 points. You've of course got the strength of the reactive fire, punishing enemies with the multi-threat eliminator ability. You can ignore cover with the pistols, you've got lone operative so you can't be picked off so easily, and you're going to have that free overwatch as well, hitting on 2s if the units get past that lone op barrier. But yeah, strength 6 against hordes I think is pretty valuable because you're wounding on 2s, you're hitting on 2s, wounding on 2s, ignoring cover. That's not actually too bad, but it's only 6 attacks. which is where the problem lies there. So you're not going to get a good volume of shots. If enemies avoid triggering your abilities, your multi-threat eliminator, then it's kind of feeling like you've wasted the points. And once an enemy unit gets within 12 inches and bypasses your Overwatch, he is pretty much easy pickings, especially in melee. There's no invulnerable save, it's just a toughness 5 model at the end of the day. Verdict, a counter shooter, more of a deterrent than raw anti-infantry. But to be honest, I'm using him more for scoring with the deep strike and low knock, not so much for the anti-infantry. Next, wanted to check out some of the bigger units. The Katana Shard, the Nightbringer. I wanted to throw in at least one Katana in this list. Strengths. Going up against elites, well, the Scythe has got the strike attack at strength 14, -4 AP, d6 plus 2 damage with devastating wounds. That's absolutely annihilating even Terminator level, Custodes level. That's annihilating the toughest of tough in terms of infantry. The sweep profile, that's going to clear your standard marine level models with absolute ease because of the damage 2. 2's to hit, 2's to wound. Be removing marines for fun. You've then got the range attack with the Gaze of Death. That's removing even some of the elite models that are infantry. Durability, we all know about Catan durability. Necrodermis halving the damage, a 4+ invulnerable save, a 5+ feel no pain save, reanimation. Quite hard to kill this thing, so he's going to be keeping his scythe attacks going throughout the game. Drain Life, of course, is an additional ability where you can be throwing out more damage, and that will be mortal wounds, so you'll be bypassing those invulnerable saves that those Terminators will have. Weaknesses, if you throw him into a horde unit in the 20 gaunts, well, it's overkill. He's got damage 2 weapons, it's not really required even if you use the sweep profile. He's got no detachment synergy whatsoever, doesn't really work with any detachment, he just kind of runs solo, does his own thing. And of course it's a big investment, so if your opponent does manage to screen out their decent units, then of course the value of the Nightbringer's 305 points does plummet. He needs to be getting into the big targets, the big infantry targets, Terminators and so on, to kind of make his points back. Verdict, a premium elite killer, devastating but costly. We're going to go even bigger now with the Tesseract Vault. I really like the Vault, not many of you guys do, but I'm a big fan. Let's see what you get for 425 points in terms of strengths and weaknesses. Now those strengths against hordes, they're brilliant. 4 Tesla Spheres is pumping out a lot of dice, 24 dice there. Wounded on 3s because they're strength 7, probably even 2s against the hordes really. There's just a lot going out, and then you've got the Catan Powers on top, which is a flexible Catan Powers because you can pick 2 of them, unless you're bracketed of course, then it'll only be 1. So you can kind of suit it to the correct infantry type. If you've got the elite infantry, you use the Antimatter Meteor. If you've got the horde kind of chaff kind of infantry, you throw out the Cosmic Fire, and you've got the option of the Times Arrow as well to be popping off a leader. It's durable, 2+, 4+ in run, 24 wounds, so it's going to be very hard to remove unless your opponent really does focus down on it. They likely will, in honesty. Weaknesses, it's not as specialised into elites as like Skorpekh Destroyers or even the Lychguard with the War Scythes. It's going to eat a lot of your points. 425 is a big chunk of your points, nearly a quarter of your 2,000 points there. And if you are bracketed, you're losing a Catan Power as well, which is even less value, unless you can somehow manage to get your wounds back, reanimation, reanimator nearby, maybe a Technomancer. You need to kind of heal it somehow to get it out of that bracket category. It's going to need to move up the board because it's only got 24-inch range as a maximum for the range attacks, and your mobility is going to be restricted due to its sheer size. This thing is not easy to move around current terrain layouts, and I play the Games Workshop Tournament Companion. I think if you go into other tournaments, WTC, there's even more terrain, so it's even more difficult to actually move this thing. And finally, no detachment synergy. Okay, you've got the Hyper Crypt and you can hyperphase it off with the Cosmic Precision. That's probably the only thing you can do, but realistically there's no buffs and bonuses. Verdict, a mass infantry suppressor, strong output but very costly. On to one of my favourite units next, the Canoptek Wraiths for 220 points. Strengths, durability, that's the number one strength here. It's going to be sticking around so it can be using its attacks turn after turn. 3+ armour, 4+ in run, 5+ feel no pain if you add the Technomancer. You can throw mortal wounds with the Wraith Form ability as soon as you do the passover in your movement phase. Against hordes, whip coils can do work. 8 attacks a model at strength 5, but no one really takes the whip coils. They all go for the vicious claws, which are better at elite infantry killing because they're strength 6 -1, 2 damage. So even your toughness 5 models are going to take a bit of damage there, but it is only damage 2, so you're looking at Space Marine level. Anything further than that, Custodes, Terminators, they're going to struggle a little bit, but because of their durability, they will probably stick around for quite a large amount of the game. Mobility, you've got 10 inches and fly and beast as well, so you can bypass terrain and screens, and they're going to work in pretty much any list. I mean, I would put them in every list because I think they're one of our best units. They do have weaknesses though. The damage is swingy because you've got a weapon skill value of a 4+, so without any external buffs they can be left underperforming. You need to be in the Awakened Dynasty for a +1 or the Canoptek Court for the rerolls. Potentially the Star Shatter Arsenal on objectives to get a bit of a better hit roll. But if you don't, then you are hitting on 4s. They've got a high cost at 300 points when you add the Technomancer to the 6-man unit. So that's a major list investment on a similar level to like the Nightbringer. They're not as effective against hordes because you're not likely to take the whip coils. But you probably will take the particle casters in fairness. And that is quite a lot of shots. It's 3 shots with Dev Wound. So you could maybe clear out your hordes with your ranged attacks. Verdict, a durable elite hunter brick, especially with those Technomancer buffs. On to the Lokhust Destroyers, another destroyer unit, 180 for a 6-man unit. I've got 3 in the image for some reason, but you would go with 6 for 180. Going up against marine equivalents, the Gauss cannons are brilliant. Strength 5 means you're wounded on 3s, -2 AP puts them on a 5-up save, and 2 damage kills marines, and they've got lethal hits as well. And you're throwing out a solid amount of dice, 3 attacks per model, 18 attacks for the unit. That's solid enough, and that's without any buffs and bonuses. If you add a Lokhust Lord, you're going to be critical hits on a 5+, so those lethals are going to really spike nicely, especially if you can find ways to reroll stuff. That's going to make them even more reliable, especially if it's the closest enemy unit on an objective, so then you'll just be fishing for those lethal hits. Great synergy with certain detachments. The Awakened Dynasty is the one that I like to go to. The Star Shatter is another one because they gain assault. Weaknesses though, they're overkilling against hordes because they've only got 1 wound, and this is a damage 2 weapon. And you're going to have that positioning tax, which I seem to find a problem with these whenever I use them. You need to be finding the closest eligible unit that's on an objective to get the full reroll benefit. I find many a time I want to fire at a certain unit, but it's not quite the closest, and I'm not going to gain any rerolls whatsoever. But the verdict with this, with a Lord, a formidable anti-infantry gunline. You can even dive into anti-tank, but this is not for this video. Triarch Stalker, 110 points for this walker. You can remove cover with its targeting relay, which is nice for other units to benefit from. You've got that durability, toughness 8, which makes it tougher than most support units, and it's got a 4+ invulnerable save on top of that, don't forget. If you are firing against Horde, you've got the Heat Ray Torrent, which is very good because you're auto hitting, so it's going to be a nice little bit of volume there with 2d6. Or you could use the Particle Shredder because it's got Blast. That's the anti-Horde options. If you wanted to go more into the elite infantry options, you've got the Heavy Gauss as well as the Heat Ray with the Melter variant, because then you can go big. If you can get within Melter range, you can now be literally removing your Terminates and Custodes, if of course they do roll bad on their invuns. Mobility, you've got the 8-inch scout plus the 8-inch movement, so they're moving pretty rapidly to get into that heat ray range or into that melter range or into charge range. And you've got good detachment options, pretty much most detachments. Star Shatter Arsenal and the Obeisance Phalanx are probably the 2 that I would go for with Triarch Stalker. Weaknesses, more of a support, so they're not going to single-handedly clear a unit like a Nightbringer could, like a Lokhust Destroyer unit could, even Immortals. They're not going to clear it, they're just more of a supporting cast member of your list. And in melee they've only got 4 attacks, and the damage is actually good. You get 3 damage a pop with those claws, but the AP is quite low for what it can do. So if you're trying to take out Terminators with 3 wounds each, but you've only got -1 AP, they're still going to have a 3-up save, so they're going to be unlucky to remove models once you've actually hit a wound as well, don't forget. Verdict for Triarch Stalkers, they're a synergy piece. It's not going to win you infantry fights alone, so they're more of a support rather than the actual be-all and end-all. So that's all the units, the strengths and the weaknesses. Next I wanted to go through the best of each category, so it's going to be a bit like an award ceremony here. So we're going to start off with the best versus hordes. So number 1, I've got Lokhust Destroyers with the, Lokhust Heavy Destroyers with the Exterminators, because of their 36-inch range, sustained hits and all that stuff. And they're just absolutely shredding because of the volume of dice. They're just doing bits. Strength 6, you're maybe wounded on 2s against those hordes. Fantastic unit. Warriors I think are up there, they're number 2 for me. There's just, again, it's volume of shots. I'm not saying Warriors as a unit are good in the general game, but going up against hordes with potentially 40 shots at rapid fire or 40 shots within 12 inches with the Reapers and lethal hits on top of that,
That's absolutely devastating to, the toughness 3 units that they've got in the game. Those Immortals, I would go down the Tesla route for Hordes. Sustain hits 2, you can spike a load of 6s, especially if you've got ways of re-rolling dice. You're going to spike your 6s. Maybe with the Plasmancer in there, you can get critical hits on a 5+, to spike the 5s and 6s. Lots of dice, lots of volume, and of course more accurate than Warriors. I think I prefer Warriors to Immortals because you've just got 20 Warriors, that's 40 attacks. But that's just against Horde. Again, in the actual whole game, as a whole, doing objectives, durability, primary, secondary, I do prefer Immortals. But for this particular category, I would go Warriors. Number 4, I've gone with the Vault. I don't know if it's just a personal bias I've got with Vaults. I love Vaults. But those Tesla Spheres, 24 attacks at strength 7 is crazy good against Horde. Against the toughness 3 stuff, it just chews through them, just mows them down. And even if you don't clear a unit, it will just deliver a lot of damage and suppress units and just minimize them, maybe even get them battle shocked and make them kind of useless. And finally, I put Tomb Blades in there because they're fast, they're cheap. You've got the flexibility of the weapons, but you'd probably go with the Particle Beamers or the Twin Tesla Carbines for Horde. If we were going on to the best of the elites, or best versus elites, I'm going to start this off with the Skorpekh Destroyers as number 1. It's just the sheer amount of attacks and the synergy with a Lokhust Lord, mortal wounds on the charge, lethal hits, you're re-rolling not re-rolling the charge, you're re-rolling your hit rolls. There's just a lot of things going off. The devastating moves from the plasma site. So whether it's going up against Marines, whether it's going up against Terminators, whether it's going up against Custodes, I think you're just doing work with Skorpekh Destroyers. And for a min unit, it's 90 points. Of course, you'd go 180, plus you get the Skorpekh Lord in there as well. But I think for their points for points, I think they're pretty good. Lokhust Destroyers next, and I think these are sort of the range version of the Skorpekh Destroyers, because there's a lot of damage here. There's a strength 5 minus 2 AP, 2 damage, loads of attacks. Lokhust Lord, similar to the Skorpekh Lord, just provides all the buffs you really need. Criticals on a 5+, maybe the +1 to hit in the Awakened Dynasty. Tailor-made to remove Space Marines, but because of the sheer amount of dice and potentially all the lethal hits, you could be doing it against elite, you could be doing it against even vehicles. But for this video we are talking elite infantry, and yeah, this unit is, in terms of range attacks, I think one of the best. The Nightbringer, deletes Terminators, it deletes Custodes, it deletes anything elite, Plague Marines, whatever. It can just destroy them. It doesn't matter what it is. The damage is high, whether you use your sweep on Space Marines, your strike on the bigger stuff, it's just going to do work. And that flexibility is a huge deal in itself. Being able to select the sweep and the strike in the fight phase is just really nice to have. Also, it's so hard to remove with the Necrodermis and so on, so he's going to be swinging as soon as he gets into engagement range. Those Wraiths, I've got number 4, they've got to have a Technomancer. Because of their durability, they're going to be sticking around like the Nightbringer, but they're much faster, and damage 2. And the Particle Casters can shoot into combat with pistol, so that's also nice, and with dead wounds. So even though it's not the biggest strength in AP, if you can get a lot of dice, because it's 3 shots per Wraith, that could be 18 shots within engagement range. And if you pick off some dead wounds, you'll be taking off maybe a Terminator just there on its own. Very useful. And I've gone with Lychguard with the War Scythes. I don't use them with War Scythes in honesty, but when you actually math it out, they're good. Strength 8, devastating wounds on top, 2 damage a pop, a decent amount of attacks, and you can buff them up. So these are my MVPs. This is the anti-horde MVP for melee. I've gone with Lychguard with the hyperphase swords and shields. Lots of attacks, strength 6, decent. At range, I've gone with the heavy destroyers with the exterminators. And with the elites in melee, I've gone Skorpekh Destroyers, and the elites at range, I've gone with the Lokhust Destroyers and the Lokhust Lord leading that unit. So guys, what do you think about anti-infantry units within the Necron Codex? What's your favourite? Put it down in the comments down below, let us all know, and like anyone else's that you see, that you agree with. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.